Good morning, everyone, dear colleagues and higher education community. My name is David. I do communication for the EWP consortium at the University of Ghent, and I will be your host for today. We would like to welcome you to the first session of the Erasmus Goes Digital webinar series in 2023. And as it is not the first time, you are hopefully a little bit familiar with how things work. So today's first session will look at the state of EWP as it is today. Given that we have a very full agenda, we will dive straight into it. And as we all have come known webinars over the past years, I will only briefly explain how things will work for today. You will be muted and there will be no time for questions in the end. However, we do have different events that focus fully on open floor questions and addressing your questions. And we will explain more about those events later today in the webinar. We do have the Q&A option where you can ask questions directly to us, and you can also vote or upvote questions from other participants that you agree with or that you would like to see answered. And we try to answer as much of those questions during the webinar. Also, after the webinar, we collect the questions and we see which one were the most important or the most pressing issues, and we try to answer those in the Q&A document that we make available after the webinar. So I hope that's kind of clear how things work. And without further ado, I would like to start the webinar, and I would do that by first welcoming our colleagues from the European Commission, from DG Education and Culture. Today, we are joined by Alexandra Licht, who I hope you're all familiar with, who is the policy officer at DG Eeckhout. And we're also joined by Harpa Sif-Arnasdottir, who is the relationship manager of EWP. I'm very pleased to give the floor to Alexandra first, as she will provide some words of welcome and also take the first presentation on her, where she will provide a state of play on the EWP project from a policy perspective. Welcome, Alexandra. I hope you can hear me.
Yes, hi. Hello to everyone. Welcome to this webinar. Thank you so much for the warm welcome. So I'm very happy to see over almost 900 participants. This is very, very nice. And I would like to start with some presentation of key points from DG Eeckhout.
Just a second.
While we are
it's for a second. For a second.
It's okay. While we're taking care of the presentation, just to remind you, we will take questions in the end, and in case you have any questions, we'll be very happy to note down. Of course, we realize that maybe not all questions can be replied in the webinar, but our team will collect them, and we'll try to do our best to reply to them maybe afterwards, and if they're repetitive questions, we can also add them to the Q&A on the portal.
Okay, you should be your presentation now, if I'm correct.
Yes.
All right, thank you for your patience, Alexandra. The floor is yours.
Okay, so some updates from our side. So first of all, I think it's very important to acknowledge the achievements so far. There has been a lot of work done from all IROs, all institutions, and thanks to a very big effort from your side, we can proudly say that nearly all targeted institutions with an ECHE can be found on EWP network. Of course, it doesn't mean that everyone is fully exchanging, but this is already a first and very important step. So I want to congratulate you, and of course to congratulate EWP network. So we have, in terms of traffic, we have over 100,000 IAs concluded so far. And in terms of learning agreements, above 70,000 learning agreements concluded for academic year 22-23. And already almost 50,000 LAs concluded for academic year 23-24. And this is absolutely not negligible and very good achievement. And of course, my colleagues from the consortium will explain that it is also due to the investment from the Commission on the interoperability action plan, which of course put a lot of effort in making learning agreements exchange and IAA exchanges easier and more possible, let's put it this way. So we see that there is a sharp increase, especially in the last months, but we know that some connections are challenging, and this is why the consortium and DGAC is working closely with the various fora of this project. So the IT developers, the Business Process Owner Forum, and of course, digital officers from each country. But of course, we know that there is still a long way to go, and there is always more support materials that can be provided, and my colleagues will explain very soon what kind of support material and support actions and activities are there and upcoming this year to help you. Now, in terms of lessons learned, we also take stock on all the activities so far, and we acknowledge that there are many things that Commission and of course all of us have learned together, that there is a fragmented IT landscape, which means we are dealing with various institutions with various IT systems, whether it's in-house, dashboard, or third-party providers, and each system has their challenges and needs and so on. So which means that achieving interoperability is very resource intensive. It takes a lot of effort, budget and time from IROs and IT staff, which is not always in place. This is why we should not expect big changes from one day to another, but knowing that this is a process towards digitalization. We also have learned that correct decision making needs a strict governance, and this is why we have in place the various governance, the governance structure and different forums to help to take the right decision. This is why there needs to be a very tight planning for new software release. Now, also, it means that we need to balance inclusion and interoperability, meaning that indeed everyone should be able to join the network, but also to be able to exchange when need to test in advance and make sure that all the functionalities are working before going on production, which means that, of course, some might stay, might be excluded. So this is why it's a really careful act of balancing. Now we know that that interoperability of student mobility goes beyond the student's data transfer. We're not just talking about transferring data from one place to another, but it's about the process. And especially in the context of the program, it is rather not a simple process. And we know also that exchanging data digitally is not always mean to simplify the process, not yet at least, but it also has a big potential. And of course, through the perspective of future gains. Now, what does it mean? Now, you saw that we presented the lessons learned, but of course, lessons learned also bring us to what can we do with these lessons? How can we improve for the future? So, of course, we're talking about a future that still until the end of the current program, but already now DGAC has launched an activity of looking of what will happen post 2027 with the new Erasmus Plus program, because you might say it's still a way to go to 2027, but we should already start to think about this now if we want to introduce substantial changes that will facilitate your life as IROs and as well as IT teams as well. So in post-2027, we acknowledge the digitalization of Erasmus Plus. It's a process and it takes time, effort, and resources. We would look into simplifying interconnectivity of systems and answering the calls from users, from you all, to simplify the way the program is structured in the next program period. We also know that there is, as I mentioned before, a large potential for resource efficiency, and we will try to see how we can achieve this efficiency. And I think there is a bit of a repetition. I apologize for this. We also, one of the goals for the next program is to have the cards that will be to support to move towards digital cards. So as you know, part of the ESC is also the digital card. Now, currently the ESC, the European Student Card, focuses on putting a hologram and a QR code in existing cards, but slowly we would need to move towards digital cards. And of course, the idea is that Erasmus Plus mobility systems, such as EWP, the app, and the student card, that all these components will be in one coherent system and interactive with each other. So this is for the future, for the far future, but let's focus on the close future. So my colleagues will provide more information, but I think it is important also for us as the Commission to announce and to acknowledge that that has been a lot of work done from all parts, from developers, from BPO forum, from our colleagues in the consortium, based on the feedback that we have received from you users and based on discussions that have been happening across the governance group, as I mentioned, the developers, the BPOs, DOs, and so on. There will be a release 7.0, the IAA release planned this spring. And the idea is that based on your feedback, we have together come up with ways to facilitate and improve interoperability. So this is a new version. It would not be backward compatible, but of course, this is not a change that will become overnight. And there is a lot of developers and systems that are already working on this and were, of course, partners in the design of this release. So this is very good news, and we hope that it will solve many interoperability issues that might still um, be with the IAAs. Now, of course, we also have some novelties, as you will see in the presentation of colleagues. Now we have two features, two functionalities available currently for the dashboard, which are the transcript of record and nomination. But of course, it is important that also the rest of the community is aware that these functionalities are made available. However, these are an early release phase, which means that of course, you might, as many of you using providers and in-house systems, you might have similar functionalities that are offered by your providers. And of course, this creates a situation that we have different ways of nominate and to exchange transcript of record. This is why these functionalities are currently in the early release phase. It's not for the whole community to be deployed. These are not mandatory and can be tested on a voluntary basis. So the idea is to collect feedback from all users and volunteer HEIs in order to be able to define the specifications and to perform the business analysis. Now, in the future, we will see how this will be implemented, in which way, and it will become clearer to all the community when time will arrive. Now, further communication and clarifications regarding that will be found on the ASCII portal and also in the various Q&A sections. Now, what to expect in 23-24, I will pass the floor to my colleagues, and I would like to thank you again for your participation. Thank you.
Thank you, Alex. And I think that I can welcome the next speaker, who I know very well, because it's my colleague, Paul Leys from the University of Ghent, who will provide an overview of what to expect in the remainder of 2023 and in early 2024. Welcome, Paul. I hope you can hear me.
Yes, I can surely hear you. Thank you, David, for this introduction. And also from my part, welcome to everybody. Happy to be back. Happy that many colleagues joined this webinar. We have almost 1,000 participants, which is a really full room. So this means people are still actively following EWP, which is a great thing. And I will indeed speak a little bit about what to expect in 23 and 24, but I would like to start, and you can go to the first slide, David, with a little bit of looking back to the interoperability reinforcement plan. The plan itself was presented at the webinar in June last year. And it came into effect because, of course, by that time we had the targets to implement everything by the end of the year of 2022, and it caused a lot of issues amongst IRO colleagues because there were clearly still some interoperability issues. Interoperability issues meaning that the data exchanges did not yet work as seamlessly as we would all like it to happen. And therefore, together with the colleagues from the European Commission, Alex already referred to it, a plan was created and executed for the period between September and February. And I think it's good to focus a little bit on the results of this plan, because this also informs, it's part of the lessons learned, and it also informs the next steps when we want to also prepare next processes. But let me first present very shortly the results of this plan. We had like 3 main pillars of activities. One was that we were going into a more regulated environment, which also has to do with quality assurance. The second one was we wanted to have stronger support for end users, for people working on a daily basis with interinstitutional agreements and learning agreements, trying to achieve it via EWP. And a last pillar was an enhanced cooperation framework. Now, when it comes to the regulated environment, the first activity was mandatory business requirements. And the goal of those requirements were to bring or to bridge the business and the technical communities. And I think those requirements that were published and also shared with the technical community had a very high impact on issues that also caused interoperability. Secondly, of course, testing and the technical workshops where the EWP consortium, together with the providers, had the opportunity to sit together and improve or look for issues in exchanging the data. Also an activity that had quite a high impact. A last part of the more regulated environment is proactive debugging. This sounds very technical. It's also very technical, but what we did there was proactively looking for critical issues and implementations, reaching out to the providers causing those issues, and of course, by solving them, also the end user experience improved. When it comes to the more user support, the SK Service Desk is now also there to solve interoperability issues. It's not used that much as we expected, the usage, but it's still open for everybody, not only for interoperability issues, but also for general issues, for improvements that you might want to suggest. And the link is support.erasmus.paper.eu. We also launched town hall meetings. David already shortly referred to it, where we have an open floor. We don't have an agenda. We just have you asking questions to the consortium, to the European Commission, in order to try to address the issues that end users are faced with. And then finally, under this action, we also had an assessment report where, based on several sources, we try to take stock of the situation, because of course we all have our own experiences, but we wanted to have a little bit more evidence-based approach. And that assessment indeed revealed that in principle EWP worked, but there were still many issues, caused a lot of frustration amongst the end user community. And we're also working on a new assessment report in October, where we will take stock of the situation today. In general, about the interoperability reinforcement plan, I think we can say we took a significant step towards establishing a more regulated, user-centric and cooperative environment. I will get back to that later, but I think it's an important result that we need to build on. And also several of the actions of the plan are now part of the structural work program for the consortium, which also testifies about the importance of several of the activities. You can go to the next slide, David. So overall, I think the impact on IIA exchanges was very high. Apart from my work for the EWP consortium as a contractor for the European Commission, I'm also responsible for the implementation of EWP in my own institution, where we have an in-house system connected to EWP. So I have been engaged in trying to conclude interinstitutional agreements from the very start, before the interoperability plan, indeed experiencing all those issues. And I must say, because over summer I also was exchanging some IIAs myself, I must say I get less issues because the difficult issues come on my desk, because there it's technical and interoperability issues. It's far less than 1 year ago. I think at the moment we can quite well exchange the data and the approvals are coming through. So this is very good news, I would say. Also, almost all three-party providers pass technical testing. There's still some issues, and those can, of course, be added to the ESCI service desk. But I think something very important that by fixing the technical issues, it also revealed process inefficiencies. And we were still discussing it with one of the governance bodies, the business process owner group, this week, that indeed the exchanges via EWP did improve a lot when it comes to the IIAs, for example. But the main cumbersome element there is that we need to send so many emails. And so this kind of feedback, of course, also builds upon and what was Alex also addressing is, okay, in the future, we might also need to fix the process inefficiencies. And also it's a lessons learned that we want to take on board in preparing for the next step that Alex was also referring to. And this is basically a summary of lessons learned, but I think it needs a little bit of an explanation. So before we go to the stable release, which is a process is ready for large-scale adoption, which means we really encourage the whole community to start exchanging, for example, IIAs or learning agreements, we would like, we really need to complete certain steps. And part of it relates back to this more regulated, quality-assured environment, where we first need mandatory business requirements, technical specifications might need to be adapted based on the requirements from the users. Then we would go to a release plan where, for the technical community, it's clear at that stage we would like to start using certain functionalities at scale. Before doing so, we also need to sit together with the technical community and in technical workshops, and as it were. And then, of course, technical testing and user acceptance testing is a crucial step before going to this large-scale adoption. So this is really lessons learned and a new approach towards the rollout of stable processes in the future. I would also like to stress that, and Alex was also referring to it, that as long as all those steps have not been completed, we are in an early release phase, because there is already a technical specification, for example, for nominations or transcript of records. In many systems, it's already available. Not sure if it works to the scale we would like it to work. It's a little bit the same situation like with the HEIs before the action plan was launched. So in some cases, it worked perfectly well. In others, it caused some issues. So that's why this is an early release phase. So as long as all those steps have not been completed, the functionality might be available, but just be very careful when using it, because we don't encourage large-scale usage. For nominations, for example, if you have a good partner or you're functioning or you're part of a European University Alliance, for example, you might experiment a little bit with the functionality, but don't expect it that all your partners are connected and everything works seamlessly. That's only once all the quality assurance steps, all the steps on the slide are completed. When we go to the stable release phase, then we are really ready for large-scale adoption. And of course, then we can really exchange nominations, for example, or other processes at scale. Also very important in this graph and all the steps is that the governance from the EWP environment, I would say, also involving, of course, DGR decision making, that the governance is included in each of the steps, and of course also needs to assess whether everything has been completed before going to a stable release. If we then look at the current processes, I also would like to share with you the current status of those processes. Starting with interinstitutional agreements, there we have a stable release. So this means there's already large-scale adoption. Alex was referring to the numbers already, where many interinstitutional agreements are already approved by both partners via the EWP network. And it also means that the interinstitutional agreements via EWP, the digital manner, it's already widely used or to be used by the HE holders across Europe. Now, I also would like to highlight that behind the scenes, the technical teams have been working on an update of the HEIs, because based on the mandatory business requirements, some vital functionality is still missing in the network. Vital from the perspective of an international relations officer. Because, and I saw one of the questions in the Q&A, like, can we already modify an interinstitutional agreement that was approved? And the answer is, you might be able to do so in your system, but it's not yet possible in EWP. And of course, when you push a button in your system, but there's no protocol commonly agreed amongst the community in EWP, then this won't happen. So that's why the technical community have been working very hard to find solutions on this business need. We, as IROs, once the agreement got approved, we all know that every now and then we would like to allow more students for a given academic year or for the rest of the duration, and therefore we need this modification functionality. The same is true for the termination, which is also a program requirement, by the way, but was not yet part of the current functionality supported via EWP for interinstitutional agreements. Besides those very clear requirements from the users and the program, also there was an updated template for interinstitutional agreements that implied also some new requirements. The first one, I think, was also informed by the broad feedback from users that the Eeckhout standard is not always working, because some use 3 digits, others use 4 digits. And here, I think, with the new release, it will be strictly only possible to use 4-digit Eeckhout, and highly recommended to base them on the beneficiary module data dictionary. Also, some fields are now required or optional. And very important here, it's the last point on the slide, that this will not affect interinstitutional agreements that are already approved by both partners. So that was a very crucial requirement from the European Commission and from the user community that, okay, we need to have new functionalities, but we do not want to do anything. For example, if there's an IIA with only 3-digit ISGET code and it was approved by both partners, don't touch it. This is approved. We don't want to reapprove, or we don't want to have any additional work. The same for the language requirements, although I think in many cases the IROs already require them, although it was not a requirement from the network perspective. So the approved IIAs, they will remain as they are right now. Of course, there might also be some IIAs already exchanged over the network. There it will depend a little bit. If, for example, you have a pending IIA, you're still in the negotiation phase, sending information back and forth, and it only has a 3-digit ISGET code, this will need to be corrected. But if you already include the 4-digit ISGET code, language requirements, this will not impact the exchange of information that you're already having with your partners. An FAQ on this new release will be shared by digital offices and also added to the ESCI portal. The ESCI, the European Student Card Initiative portal, is the official European Commission source for everything that has to do with Erasmus white paper, but also the European Student Card, the Erasmus dashboard, Erasmus app. So it's a very useful resource to start from, and there you can find the official information from the Commission and the consortium. Now, also the learning agreement process, this is also a stable release, meaning large-scale adoption, widely used by HE holders across Europe. So this is the situation. Although we might expect a new release, the same principles apply like for the interinstitutional agreements. The 2023 changes in the template mean that we will need to update the technical specification. Of course, here we also will take the user feedback into account, so expect news from us when starting this process. How we aim to roll out there is directly go to a stable release, meaning all the different steps need to be taken before we make something available to end users. There's no timing yet. This is something we need to decide with the EWP governance and also, of course, part of the work plan. Then we have the nominations and tour. Alexandra already referred to that. We're also, of course, already preparing the future. And I think nominations are a much anticipated functionality amongst the community of users, because those who are dealing with nominations nowadays are very much aware about how cumbersome it is to nominate a student. All our partners probably use a different system. And of course, here the idea is to have a common approach towards nominations and nominate students from the system that you use for managing applications. With a push on the button, data is sent to the partner institution that then confirms or rejects the nomination via EWP. This is a very high-level overview of how this could work. Same with transcript of records. However, at this stage, we're in an early release phase, which means some steps have already been completed. For example, the technical specification is available. Some parties might have already implemented it, offer this functionality to end users, but please be aware this is still the early release phase, meant to gain first-hand experience from users. You can explore functionality also to inform or have a better view on how it looks exactly, and does it reflect your reality on the floor, or do we need to take other elements into account? So that's why this is available. Usage on a voluntary basis, no encouragement for large-scale usage. You will be invited to share your feedback on the functionalities that are available at the moment via different channels, the user groups. We will discuss about the user groups later, but also via the SKey service desk. So once again, no, please the previous slide, David. Once again, nominations and tour at this stage, not mandatory. It's an early release on a voluntary basis. And we are now working on the mandatory business requirements and also updated testing protocols. And we aim to have this work completed by the end of this year. For the mandatory business requirements and the process analysis, my colleague Harpa will also share how you can become part of it, because it's clear that we would like to have the whole community, the input from the community, in order to take your input into account for this mandatory business requirements and all the other steps in this process. So here, no large-scale adoption yet. And then also some news about the Erasmus app. The Erasmus Plus app, of course, is a resource meant for students. Students can already use the app, regardless of what system you are using. Some universities think that the Erasmus app, or some colleagues, is only for universities using the EWP dashboard, which is not the case. For EWP dashboard users, the app entails more functionalities than for some other systems. But the app itself can already be used. For example, there's a mobility journey where students are guided throughout the mobility process step by step. And amongst the updates that we foresee still towards the end of this year, we will improve, or we will have a distinction in the different steps from the mobility journey, where you as an institution, by the way, can also add institution-specific information, for example, for incoming or outgoing students. But there we would like to differentiate between suggestions, mandatory and actionable items. The other elements that are part of the updates are mentioned on the slide. I think it's also worth mentioning that we will look into the linking to the language support, integrate the home project, integrate the Erasmus generation portal. So this is really meant to enrich the Erasmus app with functionalities for the students. So I think this is it from my side. Thanks a lot for your attention, and I pass the floor back to David.
Thank you, Paul. Thank you for explaining everything so clear. And I think that we can now welcome Harpa, who is one of the relationship managers for the EWP consortium, and she will be talking a little bit about the EWP user groups and how you can contribute to some of the processes that Paul mentioned and talked about, and also to some of our support materials. So Harpa, the floor is yours if you can hear me.
Yes, I can hear you. I hope you can hear and see me too.
I can hear you, but I cannot see you. But maybe that's because I'm in the presenter mode.
Okay. Well, in any case, if you can hear me, I think. Okay, great. Well, most important thing is that people can hear me. Hello, everyone. Pleasure to join you here today. Maybe just for those that might not be aware, I want to just say a few words about this role of relationship managers. So I am one of 3 relationship managers. I'm based here in DG Eeckhout, and I work on a daily basis with 2 colleagues, Monica and Malgorzata, who are based at the University of Warsaw. And our primary goal as relationship managers is to keep in close contact with you, the end users of Erasmus Without Paper functionality, as well as the developers, the technical teams that are working on the implementation of EWP in your systems. In terms of our profiles, we all have a background as mobility coordinators ourselves. So we hope that this is useful to further strengthen the cooperation and communication with all of the stakeholders that are working and using EWP. So now I'm going to discuss a little bit the EWP user groups. These have been launched some time ago, but I think perhaps not everybody is already aware. So just to say a few words about the user groups and their importance. The user groups are really foundational in the EWP governance structure. So we do have a forum with experts from international relations offices, both individuals that have a lot of experience with EWP, but also representatives of national international relations officer groups that have been nominated by the national agency. However, this is of course a smaller group of like 20 colleagues or so, but we really want to hear from the wider community, because in order for these processes to work well, it is essential that we can really see and map what the landscape is out there, what are the different practices that you are implementing, and also to collect as much as we can real-time feedback from you on what is happening on the ground and how you see the next steps for EWP. So I also want to acknowledge that a lot has changed in a few years. And maybe you will remember, I've been following this initiative for quite some time. And before the pandemic, we were not so familiar with online meetings, or at least not myself personally. And also we were not very familiar with a lot of online cooperation platforms. So we're living in a completely different reality now that gives us the opportunity to be in closer contact with you when reflecting on EWP and defining requirements and giving very clear instructions to developers on what is needed and how we should implement things. And there's also another thing that has completely changed in our reality. And I think that this is that we now have a lot of collective hands-on experience actually with EWP that we didn't have before. So now I think you would agree with me that we have a much clearer idea of where the opportunities lies, but also where the problems and issues remain that we need to address together to make sure that things work properly. And we can also see now that in order to really unlock the full benefits of digitalization, we really need to have very clear shared standards and much clearer and shared understanding about all of the business processes that we need. So this is why the EWP user groups can be incredibly impactful to make sure that we move forward in the right direction. Now, it's not just about consulting you on the future. This is also a place for you to connect with your peers. It's a place for you to discuss and brainstorm with your peers, and also to get some direct updates from the EWP consortium. But so this is what the group really is for. It's for this community dialogue. It's also important that you're aware of what the group is not. It's not really the place for you to go and ask technical questions, and it is not the place for you to go and ask policy questions about the Erasmus Plus program or other. So for this technical questions, please do go to the service desk. You will have an agent there to help you with any technical issues you may encounter and answer your questions. For policy questions, we have digital officers in all Erasmus Plus national agencies, and I encourage you to turn to them or your national agency if you have a more general policy question. And I will, just before I move on, let you know that there you can see a QR code. If you scan it, it will take you to the registration page for the user groups. So if you're not already signed up, please do so as soon as possible if you're interested in joining this community dialogue with me and the other relationship managers. Now, for how you actually, the user groups are already having a concrete impact, I want to touch upon the new EWP user guides. So this is a project that we've been working on now for some weeks, actually some months. It's taken a bit of time, but this was a task that you put on our agenda. The EWP user groups and also in our meetings with stakeholders, you really flagged the challenge of having key information about EWP and Erasmus Plus in different places. You also pointed out that there was not really a single formal publication you could turn to with non-technical descriptions of what is expected from you as a user in terms of data standards and in terms of how processes should work. And also, many of you flagged to us that it was still happening quite a lot, that you would have a different understanding from your partner what you're supposed to do in EWP and what is, for lack of a better word, allowed, not allowed, expected, etc. So we wanted to really capture everything in, well, 2 documents, one that is for the interinstitutional agreements and one for the learning agreements, and try to create a comprehensive guide for you. Of course, we would have wanted it to be a very short guide that you could quickly read through, but the reality of the situation is that there's a lot of things that need to be clarified and put together, but we hope that the design of the guide will allow you to navigate it quite easily and find the information that you're looking for. But you not only as EWP users put this on the agenda, you also really co-created the content with us. We sent out a survey and 500 of you replied with very concrete examples to us of what needed to be clarified, and also gave us concrete examples of scenarios where you felt you needed to complete a certain task in EWP, but there is not really a place for you right now to do so. And what would we guide you to do in those cases? So based on all of this community feedback, and after also consulting the BPO, so the smaller expert groups and the digital officers in the national agencies, we've now put together these guides that will be published as soon as possible, I hope in the coming days. But here you can see what information is contained in each of the guides. So it goes through the steps of what you need to get you and your institution started, either for the interinstitutional agreements or the learning agreements, but in both cases, the steps are the same essentially, but we wanted to try to be as comprehensive as we can, make sure that you don't miss any information. We put the key Erasmus Plus requirements also in there that relate to using EWP in the new program. We put flowcharts to try to explain how the business processes work. We compiled a non-technical description of all of the data fields, so there should be no doubt in terms of what is expected to as a data entry here, and in some cases also clarify what purpose the data entry serves, so it's clear to you. And then also throughout the guidance, we've highlighted frequently asked questions and also some of these key scenarios that you pointed out where you were not entirely sure how to proceed in EWP. And this is, for example, with like blended intensive programs, also some clarifications on what is the difference between approval and signature and all of those things. So we really hope that this captures everything that you need to have clarity on to implement EWP in your everyday work. There's also a very key important thing included in the document, which is now Paul and Alex as well mentioned a version 6 and a version 7 of the HEIs. In these guides, we've explained how things function today, but also gave you a heads up of how they will function once the release happens. So now you have time also to understand what will be changing and to prepare using the version 7 of the HEIs with your partners. Also, of course, I can see in the Q&A that you have very important questions about these 2 releases, and this will be addressed in the note that will be circulated quite soon. So I hope that this will provide the clarity that you need on both these versions, but also these key issues that you face in your daily work with EWP. Now, this was just the first step in using the user groups to really improve things, how they're functioning. Now, we've recently launched a new consultation on nominations and transcript of records. This has been referred to several times already. Digital officers have received this flyer, and I want to thank them very much. Use this opportunity to thank all of the digital officers for all their support in circulating flyers and circulating information to you. I hope you have already received it, but if not, please find the QR code now on the screen where you can scan, sign up to the user groups if you haven't done so already. If you're already in the user groups, I hope that you have seen that we've launched these 2 new consultation channels, one on the nominations, another one on the transcript of records. The purpose here is to really have an in-depth dialogue with you to understand how do these processes work today in your institutions? How do you think they should work in the future? What are the key requirements that need to be reflected in the documentation we're preparing, et cetera, et cetera. So I'm already following the channels. I'm actively there, excited to log in every day and see what you're sharing with us and have a discussion with you. And also we will have upcoming some surveys, some more specific questions to really make sure that we understand well what is probably most feasible for the entire community in regards to these processes. So I strongly encourage you to take part in this consultation. I also encourage you to ping pong ideas with your colleagues in the channels, because this is also where some ideas are born that is difficult perhaps for us to identify centrally, but you can identify with your partners, because the key fact remains that if we want processes to work well, we need to perhaps to some extent adapt our internal processes and our internal systems so that we can have interoperability. That's the key word that we need to have in EWP in order for you to really benefit from having a digital process in place. So this was it from my side. I look forward to seeing all of you in the user groups and to continue this interesting dialogue. On a final note, this platform, the user groups, is for you. I consider all of the community a co-owner of this platform. If you have ideas, suggestions for new channels to create, or improvements in how we consult with you on EWP, feel free to share this in the user groups. We're always very open to feedback from you on how to organize this work. So thank you very much. And I give the floor over to David, I think.
Yes, thank you, Harpa. And before we move to the next section and the next topic, I'm going to invite my colleague Paul to the floor again, because we're seeing a lot of questions regarding the V6 and the V7 version release of the HEIs and what this might mean. As Harpa mentioned, there will come a lot of more information on paper your way, but to appease some of your questions and to address some of your initial thoughts, Paul will provide a little bit more background to some of the questions that you have. Can you hear me, Paul?
Yes, I can hear you, and thank you, David, for passing back the floor. So when it comes to the new HEI release, I think it's very important to stress once again that indeed there will be some changes in the functionalities. Backward compatibility is something technical, but it means that one version is not compatible anymore with the new version. But it's super important to stress that all the agreements that were already approved via the EWP network remain valid. So this is more a technical operation. It's not an operation for us as end users. There were also some questions about the agreements that are still being exchanged in the network and might not be concluded before this change kicks in. I think there it's important to stress once again that when the data inside this interinstitutional agreement is compatible with the new version, meaning the Eeckhout code, you use a 4-digit Eeckhout code, you have the language requirements for student and STA, staff mobility, for teaching mobility, because those will become required in the new version. This also does not impact anything on the current exchanges. The only possible impact it might have on non-concluded agreements is those that do not follow the 4-digit Eeckhout code logic. So where you don't have 4-digit, but for example, only 2 or 3 digits. This type of exchange of this agreement will need to be corrected in your system. The same for language requirements. If you did not yet include the language requirements for students and staff, you won't be able to conclude to finally approve the agreement. So you will need to first add it inside your system, and then you can further exchange. But in general, from the exchanges that I also see on a daily basis, this kind of information is already provided for a large majority of the agreements. So the impact on the end users for going from the current version towards the new version will be limited. It will be limited based on what I said right now, but of course there will be an impact in terms of functionalities, because that was also a question in the chat that got quite some votes. For example, you will be able to modify agreements that were approved before via the EWP network. This is a much anticipated functionality, I would say, because it's common practice in the International Relations Office. Once again, some systems already offer this functionality to the users, but as long as it's not supported by EWP, you cannot expect this process to be completed seamlessly, because as long as we don't have a common language on a technical level on how this modification should work. And this is implemented because the language has been defined. The next step is to implement it. And this is indeed this version 7 release. The exact date, that's of course something that will be further discussed with the technical community. It will also depend a little bit on the progress. But I think it's very important to stress once again that already approved interinstitutional agreements and those that are still being exchanged on a network level that already comply with the new specification and the novelties when it comes to ISKIT, when it comes to language requirements, there's no impact on the end user whatsoever. So I thought it was good to stress it once again. So thanks also for the question and upvoting it in the Q&A.
All right, thank you, Paul. Maybe one additional question from my end that I saw in the chat is that people were asking how they should behave or what they should do in that transition time. So I think what is from the 25th of March to the 7th of April, if they should stop exchanging or do anything else than they were doing before. Is there something that we can add to that specific question?
This transition period, it still need to be, the dates are not fixed as far as I know. It's still, but indeed, in this short period of time, I think it's better not to try to exchange HEIs. But of course, from now until the end of the year, until spring, when the release is upcoming, I would even encourage users to exchange HEIs. We all know that there's an upcoming call for mobilities. And some systems, okay, we have the email or other renewals at the moment, but I already noticed that some systems also for nominations require an approved agreement and all of that. So this is a step-by-step approach. So I assume that many of us will be working on interinstitutional agreements, preparing for the next calls. And of course, there's no reason not to try to conclude this process via EWP, because they will remain valid. The data exchange will also be applicable for the next phase once the new version is active.
All right, thank you, Paul. And then we are moving to the next segment, which I'm going to present myself. So I'll make my camera visible. I will provide a brief overview on EWP communication, more broadly on the communication channels that we use for communication and some of the initiatives that we have. So as you're aware, there has been some time between this webinar and the previous webinar, and that's because we've been working on how that we can enhance our communication activities. So together with the European Commission, the European Consortium, we have looked at what we were doing in terms of communication, what worked well, and what we could do to enhance our outreach communication and our outreach activities. So I'm going to begin with an overview of the communication channels. And it's something that we mentioned already a lot today, and that is the ESCI portal. In general, the ESCI portal is the main gateway to the European Student Card Initiative ecosystem. It's where you can find all the main is the main source for official news updates and for upcoming events. So in general, if you're looking to see when are there going to be events, what are the different building blocks, where you can find sources of communication, it's the ESCI portal. Besides that, it's also the place where you can find the EWP governance reports. What are the governance reports? It's an overview of all the main topics being discussed within the different governance bodies. You already heard a lot of them being mentioned today. It's the Business Process Owners Group, it's the IT colleagues, it's the Digital Office Forums. So that's where a lot of things that are being discussed, and it provides an overview of what's being discussed, and that can give you a feel or a better insight into what's going on and what the future will look like. So that's an easy way for you to find out more information and also to see that we are indeed working on many of the things that are being brought up by end users. but you can also see that these things often take time. And this is a way that we provide more transparency and accountability towards end users. The ESCI portal also references to other sources of information. For example, Harpa mentioned the user groups. There's also a page on the ESCI portal about the user groups that explains what the user groups are and provides you a link to the user groups. It explains how you can sign up to the user groups, etc. So in general, the ESCI portal bundles together all the information that we have and all the different support channels that we have, and you can find information there. One of the other sources that we use is the EWP Competence Center. That's where you can find a lot more in-depth support documentation for end users. For example, on the Erasmus EWP dashboard, there are pages where that provide a walkthrough of the different steps within the dashboard, how you can sign up, etc. So that's more in-depth information that you can find on the Competence Center. But again, if you want to find the Competence Center, you can also go through the EWP, the ESCI portal, where you will find a reference to this support documentation. Also, something new is that you might have noticed for this webinar is that the social media channels of Eeckhout, so it's mainly on Twitter, or formerly known as Twitter, and Facebook. We also now communicate events or news updates as an additional source of making available our events, and also to provide more ways of that people can. This is to make sure that people don't miss messages, and we try to use as much communication channels. But as I mentioned, in order not to confuse people, like I said, the main way to find information will always be the ESCI portal. And something that's coming up, I will talk about later, is that we are introducing a new communication method, and that's a newsletter that we will be bringing out. So briefly going back on what I mentioned is that we want to continue what worked well, or what we received a lot of positive feedback in the past years and past months, and that is the Erasmus Goes Digital webinars, what we're doing today, but also the town hall meetings, which we mentioned before, that were introduced as part of the action plan. The town hall meetings are a way of adding to the webinars, where in the webinars we mainly present information and updates. But because there is never enough time in webinars for Q&A, the town halls are a separate format that only focuses on Q&A. So there you can just come, instead of having to type your question, you can just answer questions to the panelists, who are mostly going to be from the EWP Consortium and the European Commission, the different task leaders, so you can ask technical questions, you can ask policy questions, etc. And we try to answer some of those questions in a more direct approach. Other things that we keep doing is that we always work to update our support materials in the ESCI portal and the knowledge base. As Paul mentioned, and as Harpa mentioned, there are always going to be updates to some of the things that already exist, or if there is a new functionalities available in the dashboard, we update the support material so that there's no outdated information that you find on these portals. The other thing that I mentioned are the governance reports that are available on the ESCI portal. And we also regularly provide news articles that give more insight to EWP, statistics on the network, an overview of some of the things that the help desk has been working on, etc. And then some of the things that are new, and there are also included some things that I already mentioned before. That's the use of the social media channels of DG Eeckhout. It's the newsletter that I will talk about in a minute. There will also be more student-facing communication, which is, of course, part of the work that's been done on the Erasmus Plus app. And there's also the EWP Champions initiative. So what's this newsletter that I've been talking about? It's a new way that we want to provide information in a more direct format to the community. So the newsletter is something that will be, if you subscribe, something that will be delivered bi-monthly in your email inbox. So it's not something that you will have to go look for. Once you've registered, once you've signed up, it's something that will come to you. Of course, we will also try to make available previous newsletters on the ESCI portal or somewhere else, but this is an added way of finding them. And the newsletter will provide updates on all the different EWP building blocks. And it will also include invitations to EWP events, such as today, the webinar, the town hall, etc. Now, how are we going to approach this? The first newsletter will be made available in general. It's not going to be via email inbox. We're going to send out an email, a newsletter through all the channels that we have. We will use the digital officers to make the newsletter available. We put it on the ESCI portal, we will share it. Because in the newsletter, there will also be an article that explains what the newsletter is and how you can sign up. As you can see, there is in the slide, there's a link included to the website and also a QR to the place where you want to sign up to the newsletter. So you can already go do that. But in order to make sure that we announce the newsletter properly, that we provide insight to what the newsletter will be, how it will look, what the content will be, we're going to provide a first newsletter, presumably towards the end of September, which will also include all the information of how you can sign up for future newsletters. So this is something new that we're very excited about. It's something that was mentioned often by end users, that they were looking for an easier way to get all the updates. And I think this is a format that would work very well. Now, what's next for communication in the remainder of 2023? There are two main things that we want to mention. The one thing is that some of our colleagues from the European Commission and from the EWP consortium will be present at the EA meeting in Rotterdam towards the end of this month. And there are a few sessions where they will be present and they will be speaking about the future of EWP and Erasmus+. You can see on the slide that there are three specific sessions where you can meet our colleagues. So if you're there, we invite you to join those sessions and to come at the stand of DG Eeckhout of the European Commission, where there will also be a mini session hosted on the EWP state of play. The other things are some of the webinars and town halls that are planned for the rest of the year. There are at the moment two sessions scheduled, one town hall and one webinar. As you can see, the first town hall will be towards the end of October. And there will be another webinar towards the middle of November, focusing more on implementing EWP and doing it the right way, where we will provide some hands-on experience of how to implement the EWP and an overview of some of the support material that we have to get people started or to help people along the way. So that was the webinar. That was it for today. I want to mention some things again that I mentioned in the beginning, but we don't know if everybody was already here. You have been asking a lot of questions in the Q&A, which is something that we of course support. As always, we will make available after the webinar a Q&A document. So it's a document where we collect the most relevant and the most asked topics in Q&A format, and we make available the answer that we've provided so that you have an overview of some of the questions that were asked that you found interesting, so that you can have a look at that. We will also try to make available a lot of the things that we mentioned today, how that you can Harpa shared a flyer for the EWP user groups, how you can sign up for the user groups, how you can sign up for the consultations, how you can sign up for the webinar, for the newsletter. So I assume not everybody had time that was interested to scan the different QR codes or see how they can sign up, but rest assured we will make also available all that information afterwards. So thank you, everyone. As always, we receive a lot of questions from people asking if the webinars are recorded or that they cannot join or that their colleague is interested, but they can't join. The webinars are recorded and live streamed on YouTube. So the recordings will also be made available afterwards for anyone who was interested but wasn't able to join. So if you have colleagues or people you know that ask those questions, we try to answer them via email as well. But rest assured, as always, the webinars will also be available afterwards. So I think that's it from my side. Thank you everyone for joining. It was a much anticipated webinar for us because it's been a long time since we had the chance to interact with you. The number of people that joined was very high. So thank you everyone. And as always, if you have questions, if you have things that you want to look out, we have the service desk where you can go to for technical questions, and you have the European Student Card Initiative portal where you can go for more information about future events, etc. So thank you for your time, and looking forward to seeing you soon in the future. Goodbye, everyone. Thank you.